Welcome back. You're watching the official podcast of the new mega musical, Brother Joseph, the amazing true life story of Joseph and Emma Smith. I'm Brett Battaglia.
And I'm Truus Henbach. Thank you for joining our continuing conversation about the early days of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
All right, so today we're going deep, really deep, into early 19th century American religion.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and specifically we're looking at how this period that historians call the Second Great Awakening shaped a young Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
And to do that, we're going to be looking at like sermons and historical accounts.
Like religious archaeology.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great way to put it.
So we can like really understand the world that birthed the Latter-day Saint movement.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember that, the vast majority of churches in Joseph Smith's America were Protestant.
Okay.
We're talking about, while Catholicism existed, it wasn't as prevalent. And very few early Latter-day Saints came from a Catholic background.
Okay, so Protestantism is like our backdrop for all of this.
Yeah.
But how essential is understanding like all the little details and nuances of Protestantism to really like get the origins of the Latter-day Saint movement?
It's crucial. I mean, imagine trying to understand a tree without knowing anything about the soil it grew in. The Second Great Awakening was this incredibly fertile ground for new religious ideas. And to understand Joseph Smith's vision, we need to go back even further to the roots of Protestantism itself.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. We're talking about the European Reformation. Figures like, Martin Luther and John Calvin challenging the Catholic Church, or a real religious shakeup. But how did that European drama end up influencing a young man in America?
Well, think of it like seeds carried across the Atlantic. The Reformation spawned all these different Protestant denominations, Lutherans, Calvinists, each with their own interpretations of Christianity. And those divisions landed right on American shores. And then it got even more complicated with things like the English Reformation and the Church of England being created.
So now we have Puritans, Presbyterians, Quakers, a whole mix of Protestant flavors. But then America after the Revolution was a whole different ballgame, right? No more state-sponsored religion. A move towards religious freedom. How did that, impact things?
It had a massive impact. Attendance in those, established churches actually went down.
Oh, really?
But it opened the floodgates for alternative churches to thrive, especially those low church denominations, like the Methodists and the Baptists.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. We have this distinction, right, between high church, formal and hierarchical, and low church, more focused on personal experience and conversion. How did these different styles of worship play into the Second Great Awakening? And could they have influenced Joseph Smith's own religious approach?
Absolutely. Those low church folks, later known as evangelicals, they were at the heart of the Second Great Awakening. It was all about personal conversion experiences, emotional intensity, and spiritual seeking. Imagine these massive outdoor camp meetings, crowds of people swept up in religious fervor.
Wow.
That intensity had a really powerful effect on people.
Yeah. So we have Joseph Smith, right, growing up amidst this religious whirlwind, a mix of established churches, burgeoning new denominations, and this surge of revivalism. What was it like for him trying to navigate all of this? Did he, connect with any of these movements?
Well, that's where it gets fascinating. Joseph Smith describes this longing to feel that religious excitement he saw around him, but he struggled to find a place where he truly fit in. There are even accounts of him attending Methodist camp meetings and being deeply moved, but still unsure of where he belonged.
So he's on a quest, searching for a genuine spiritual connection. Did he have any interactions with, preachers who might have influenced him during this time?
We know that Joseph Smith was exposed to a variety of preachers. Two names that pop up are Reverend Jesse Townsend, he was a Presbyterian minister in Palmyra, and Reverend George Lane, a Methodist circuit rider known for his powerful preaching.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Townsend's sermons, some of which we actually have original handwritten copies of, they really emphasized introspection and prayer. One excerpt that stands out is where he urges his congregation to give yourselves much to prayer, for a divine blessing to accompany the word preached. Makes you wonder if this focus on personal revelation resonated with young Joseph.
Yeah, it's interesting because that emphasis on personal revelation seems to be like a recurring theme in the Second Great Awakening, especially among those low church denominations. Do we see that in George Lane's preaching as well?
Absolutely. Lane was a Methodist circuit rider known for his fiery sermons. And the emotional intensity he brought to those camp meetings. Imagine a scene described by one historical account where Lane had the whole congregation trembling, like a forest in a mighty wind.
Oh, wow. So we had these preachers emphasizing personal experience and a direct connection with God. Was there, like, a sense of questioning religious authority during this period? Because later on, Joseph Smith's own revelations directly challenged the established religious order.
That's a great point. The Second Great Awakening was a time when people were encouraged to read the Bible for themselves and to interpret Scripture through their own lens, which definitely had an impact on how people viewed religious authority. This spirit of questioning traditional hierarchies might have paved the way for Joseph Smith to embrace his own prophetic calling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that Joseph Smith was deeply moved by the Methodist camp meetings, but still unsure of where he belonged. Were his family members, like, caught up in this religious fervor as well?
Oh, they were very much part of this religious landscape. We know that several of Joseph's siblings and his mother, Lucy, joined the Presbyterian Church. But there's this compelling anecdote about Joseph's father that reveals a lot about the religious dynamics of the time.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Well, apparently, Joseph's father was deeply offended by a Presbyterian minister who, at the funeral of Joseph's brother, Alvin, suggested that Alvin might have gone to hell because he wasn't a church member.
Oh, wow.
You can see how this kind of experience might contribute to Joseph's disillusionment with the existing religious options.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Joseph Smith, right, caught in this whirlwind of religious revivalism, searching for truth, and ultimately turning to the Bible for guidance. And then comes that pivotal moment inspired by James 1:5, where he decides to seek answers directly from God.
Yeah.
Huge.
And it's not just that he decides to pray. He chooses to do something quite radical for him, to pray aloud for the first time.
Wow.
This decision speaks volumes about his commitment to finding truth, even if it means stepping outside of his comfort zone.
And this act leads to the first vision, the foundational event in Latter-day Saint history. Before we delve into the first vision itself, I'm curious about how the musical brother Joseph portrays all of this religious drama leading up to that pivotal moment.
Oh, the musical does a fantastic job of immersing the audience in the emotional landscape of the Second Great Awakening. You have these powerful scenes depicting the fervor of the camp meetings, the charisma of the preachers, and the spiritual yearnings of the people.
Instead of focusing on, like, specific songs, could you talk about how the musical, like, as a whole helps us grasp the broader context of this era?
Sure, it uses music and visuals to transport you back to that time, allowing you to experience the energy and passion of the revivals, but also the quieter moments of introspection and doubt that people like Joseph Smith were grappling with. It doesn't shy away from showing the complexities and even contradictions of the Second Great Awakening, creating a more nuanced portrayal.
I'm picturing those scenes of impassioned preachers and crowds caught up in religious fervor, contrasted with Joseph's internal struggle to find his own path. It must be a powerful experience for the audience.
It is, and it helps us understand how the Second Great Awakening wasn't just about mass conversions. It was a catalyst for personal transformations and the emergence of new religious ideas, like those that Joseph Smith would eventually bring forth.
Okay, so back to Joseph Smith and his journey. He's searching for truth, turns to the Bible, and ultimately decides to take that leap of faith and pray aloud for guidance. What happens next? This is the part where we really need you to paint a picture for us. Describe the first vision. What did Joseph see? What did he experience?
Imagine a young Joseph Smith kneeling in prayer in a grove of trees near his home. Suddenly, a light appears, brighter than the sun, and it completely envelops him.
Whoa, that sounds intense.
It was a profound and awe-inspiring experience. Then, amidst this brilliant light, two glorious beings appear, standing above him in the air.
Two beings. Who were they?
Joseph identified them as God the Father and Jesus Christ.
Wow. I can only imagine what must have been going through his mind at that moment. What did they say to him? What was the message?
The accounts of the first vision, they vary slightly in their details, but the core message is consistent. God the Father, gesturing towards Jesus Christ, declares, "Joseph, this is my beloved son. Hear him."
Powerful words. What was the significance of this experience for Joseph Smith? How did it change his understanding of God and religion?
This wasn't just some abstract theological concept for Joseph Smith. This was a visceral, earth-shattering confirmation that God was real, personal, and capable of communicating directly with his children.
Wow.
It demolished the assumptions he'd grown up with and laid the groundwork for his prophetic mission.
And it's from this one experience, this incredibly personal encounter, that a whole new religious movement springs forth, That's remarkable.
It is. The first vision is the cornerstone of Latter-day Saint belief. It shapes their theology, their understanding of revelation, their relationship with God. It's this radical assertion of continuing revelation, which flew in the face of the prevailing religious climate.
Speaking of that climate, we've been talking a lot about the Second Great Awakening and its emphasis on personal experience and spiritual seeking. But could you elaborate on how the first vision and its claim of a direct encounter with God might have been received in Joseph Smith's time?
Well, think about it. The dominant religious discourse was still very much focused on established churches and their interpretation of Scripture. Joseph Smith comes along, claiming to have seen God the Father and Jesus Christ as two separate beings, directly challenging the concept of the Holy Trinity. You can imagine how unsettling this must have been to those who clung to traditional religious structures.
So in a sense, the first vision wasn't just a personal revelation for Joseph Smith. It was a challenge to the religious status quo. It makes you wonder if the very environment of the Second Great Awakening, with its emphasis on individual spiritual experience, might have inadvertently paved the way for a more radical departure from traditional Christianity.
It's certainly a fascinating paradox. The Second Great Awakening, while rooted in Protestant Christianity, encouraged a level of religious individualism that might have set the stage for the emergence of new religious movements like the Latter-day Saint movement.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the religious world of Joseph Smith, it strikes me that we often view historical figures through the lens of their accomplishments, their finished products. But by exploring the context in which they lived, the influences that shaped them, we gain a much richer understanding of their journey.
Yeah.
It really makes me think about how important it is to keep questioning, to keep exploring, to not just accept things at face value.
To embrace the journey, the process of searching.
Exactly, not just focusing on the destination.
To have the courage to stand by what you believe.
Even when it's different from what everyone else thinks.
Joseph Smith's story is just one example of this timeless human quest for truth.
But it offers valuable lessons for anyone trying to understand themselves.
And the world around them.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive,
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
We live in a world with so much information.
Right, information overload.
But it's not always easy to know what to trust.
So what do we do?
Remember to create space for silence, for reflection. Listen to that quiet inner voice, the one that speaks your truth.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And for you, our listener, I hope this exploration has not only shed light on the origins of the Latter-day Saint movement, but also sparked a curiosity to delve deeper into the complexities of religious history and the powerful interplay of individual faith and historical forces. Maybe it's even inspired you to ask, how has your own spiritual journey been shaped by the world around you?
Join us for our next episode where we'll dive into the early life of Emma Hale before she married Joseph. I'm Truiz.
And I'm Brett. We'll see you next time as we continue to explore the incredible early history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, accompanied by the new mega musical, Brother Joseph.